Can you tell me anything about the captivating American preacher and televangelist? Is that all the information you have about him?
In the 1970s and 1980s, Swaggart became well known for his televangelism, gospel music, and fiery preaching, propelling him to the forefront of the Pentecostal movement. The Jimmy Swaggart Ministries were started and are now headed by him. It features the Jimmy Swaggart Telecast, a television show that airs on different networks throughout the world. Rumors of scandal, however, lurk beneath the shiny exterior of his ministry, which proclaims salvation, hope, and light. The unimaginable has transpired. This damning event, what is it? For Jimmy Swaggart and #039's legion of fans, what does this mean? Is Jimmy going to be okay after that? Watch this video to find out. A narrative that has shaken the Christian community to its very foundation is what we shall be tackling. The Heartland Swaggarts are a musical, ministerial, and business clan with a complicated history of family strife and dysfunction. In this particular family, the expression "it became far more significant to retain it within the family." An interesting tradition runs in their family. When relatives became relatives through marriage, in-laws became relatives through intermarriage, and aunts and uncles took turns playing musical chairs. A huge knotted ball of rubber bands best describes the Swaggart clan as the years went by and family relationships became more intertwined. Contorted in every possible way, while still remarkably intact. Surprisingly, the Swaggarts, faithfully carrying on their special brand of family unity and doing so from one generation to the next. Jimmy was born in Faraday, Louisiana, to this family on March 15, 1935. Minnie Belle Heron was his mother, and her husband was a pastor who went by the nicknames Son and Sonny. William Heron and #039's fair-haired daughter. Because his parents were so invested in his musical and ministerial upbringing, Jimmy was immersed in both fields from an early age. His childhood was not always filled with love and laughter. Everyday life was difficult for them because of their extreme poverty. Attending Faraday High School was a hardship for Jimmy academically. Nevertheless, Jimmy and #039's devotion to music served as his linchpin. As early as his adolescent years, Jimmy demonstrated a strong interest in ministry, played the guitar, and sang gospel songs. After finishing high school, Swaggart decided to follow a career in ministry. After a year of attending what is now known as World Evangelism Bible College, formerly Baton Rouge Bible Institute, he left because he couldn't and #039 afford it. After that, he tried his hand at a few different occupations, such as truck driving and pipe fitting. He then accomplished an extraordinary feat at the tender age of 17. He wed Frances Anderson, a distant relative, in 1952. She was 15 years his senior. They crossed paths at Jimmy and #039's father and #039's church, the Assembly of God. Donnie was born to the young parents in October 1954. Subsequently, Swaggart and #039's continued attendance at the Assembly of God church prompted him to sense a call to the ministry. Jimmy received a call from the church, which is well known for its dynamic worship services and heavy focus on the Holy Spirit. After coming to terms with the fact that he couldn't and #039 turn away the inner calling, Jimmy decided to devote his life to preaching the gospel. A watershed moment in Jimmy and #039's career came in 1956 when the Assemblies of God ordained him. But Jimmy was almost derailed when something happened. Idon and #039 know. As devout as Jimmy was, his wife Frances was his unwavering rock. She sought his enthusiasm and promise. As a couple they dove headfirst into the church and #039's events. Jimmy stepped up to the plate and started helping out with everything from leading worship to aiding with other church events. He became well liked by the group due to his magnetic personality and strong religious convictions. Jimmy became more and more certain that his calling was to preach as his involvement deepened. The church started to notice something different when his conviction became so strong. He was confronted by the church because they thought his beliefs and actions were radical. It didn't and #039 deter Jimmy. His love for music and preaching kept him going. His passionate gospel concerts and fiery sermons continued to draw crowds, and he ultimately decided to launch his own ministry, the Family Worship Center, which would later become an outpost of the Assemblies of God.
The sad truth is, I paid a price for this.
Even though they were struggling financially, Jimmy and his wife felt compelled to start a ministry from scratch.
However, he remained enthusiastic and committed.
In order to support his family, he labored ceaselessly. Jimmy managed to make ends meet on $30 per week while working 2 part-time jobs and performing Southern gospel music at area churches.
Considering these numerous obstacles, when did Jimmy start televangelism?
When Jimmy Swaggart was just starting out in his ministry in his early 20s, he looked up to Reverend Gerald Durstein, a young Mennonite pastor who had a reputation for powerful prayer and miraculous encounters.
For Jimmy, this mentorship would be the turning point in his life. After seeing Jimmy and #039's promise, Reverend Durstein recognized his unique gift for music and preaching.
He mentored Jimmy and encouraged him, taking him under his wing.
He recognized in Jimmy a man with a profound and original gift for connecting with others.
The original proposer of Jimmy and #039's televangelism explorations was Reverend Durstein. Jimmy grew in his understanding of the media and #039's potential for gospel proclamation under Reverend Durstein and #039's tutelage.
How did this put him on the road that would lead to his future stardom as a televangelist? Everything changed in that one instant.
Jimmy was able to get a 30-minute slot on a local Baton Rouge television station in 1971.
As he got ready for his first broadcast, the anticipation was getting the best of him.
A new platform was and #039 the only thing this was. It was a chance to spread his message to many people outside his church.
Then how was his performance?
Jimmy had clearly connected with his listeners because their hearts were affected by his sincere words.
With each passing week and month,
both Jimmy Swaggart and #039's popularity and the size of his audience continued to rise. In the 1970s, Swaggart and #039's ministry grew rapidly as his message reached people all over the world. It quickly rose to the ranks of the world and #039's most popular religious television shows.
The unique use of video and music by Jimmy revolutionized his ministry.
What made him unique was his ability to combine gospel music with impassioned preaching, elevating his profile to that of a televangelist legend. He was nominated for a Grammy in 1980 for Best Traditional Gospel Performance for his album Worship, which is relevant to the topic of gospel music. There will be more on this later on, but this would not be the most popular event that happened to Swaggart during this period. When 1984 came to a close,
degrees in communication and education were the original offerings of Jimmy Swaggart Bible College, JSBC, which Jimmy Swaggart established.
His media influence reached new heights in 2010 when he established the Sun Life Broadcasting Network, SBN, a platform that airs his sermons, music, and religious programming around the clock to an international audience. Francis was there for him every step of the way, taking care of the nuts and bolts of their ministry while offering unfaltering encouragement. He became famous in the televangelism field for his passionate preaching and outstanding gospel music performances.
But evil was stirring under the holy man.
Many people saw Jimmy Swaggart as more than simply a minister.
As a spiritual leader, he inspired faith and perseverance in them.
His most loyal followers were individuals who sought comfort and motivation from his teachings.
His passionate performances, sincere songs, and steadfast dedication to sharing the gospel won him their admiration. But the scrutiny increased in tandem with his influence. The groundwork for something far darker was laid as the criticisms intensified.
Tell me what the holy guy did. His techniques and the openness of his ministry and #039's finances came under scrutiny from critics. Many were suspicious of his extravagant spending habits since they appeared to contradict the modest origins he frequently mentioned. The passionate delivery of his lectures alarmed others, who thought he was trying to manipulate his audience. Some saw these occurrences as proof that Swaggart was hypocritical because his behavior contradicted the moral principles he advocated. They took pictures of Swaggart outside Room 7 with a local prostitute named Deborah Murphy.
At this point, it increasingly resembles a film.
Based on what is stated in Swaggart, an unofficial biography of an American preacher, Gorman requested that Swaggart publicly repent and assist in his reinstatement to the Assemblies of God.
A deal was struck: if Swaggart confessed to lying about the affairs, Gorman would remain silent.
Gorman personally delivered a final warning to Swaggart after nearly a year of silence.
After Swaggart failed to reply,
in February 16, 1988, Gorman informed James Hamill, who was a member of the Executive Presbytery of the Assemblies of God, about the scandal. People were startled to hear that Swaggart had allegedly been involved with a prostitute. Recall that this was the same minister who had previously spoken out against comparable actions. People reacted quickly and harshly once the news spread like wildfire. Those who had put their faith and respect in Swaggart experienced a deep feeling of betrayal. The group that had ordained him, the Assemblies of God, wasted no time getting to work. Therefore, Swaggart and #039's 3-month TV program suspension was upheld.
Did Gorman indeed lie?
The Associated Press reports that a polygraph examination administered by an expert from the New York City Police Department revealed that Jimmy and #039's paramour, Deborah Murphy, did not pass the test. Murphy was found lying about important sections of her tale after trying to sell it to the National Enquirer for $100,000.
This test followed.
After having an article published in Penthouse magazine, Murphy placed the blame for her failed polygraph test on ingesting cocaine the day prior.
Was Swaggart engaged with a drug user? For the holy man, what were the repercussions of this?
While quoting Psalm 51 and begging for forgiveness from his family, congregation, and viewers, Swaggart made a tearful public confession on television, admitting his misdeeds without going into detail. On February 21, he famously delivered the speech, end quote, "I
have sinned," end quote.
Among the most high-profile televangelist scandals of the #039 ADS occurred in 1988. As is customary for cases of sexual immorality, the National Presbytery of the Assemblies of God increased Swaggart and #039's punishment to the usual 2 years. The leadership of the Assemblies of God defrocked Swaggart, withdrawing his credentials and ministry license, because they still believed he was and #039 truly repentant.
Swaggart lost what he had worked for in his ministry. Given that he was just as guilty as Gorman, why did he accuse Gorman in such a way?
The scandal and #039's effects continued beyond that point.
As a result of the controversy and the accompanying problems with accreditation, enrollment at Jimmy Swaggart Bible College, JSBC, dropped dramatically.
World Evangelism Bible College was the new name by 1991.
However, there were just 370 students left.
In addition to disbanding its basketball team and music and PE departments, the college also ended its secretarial science and communications offerings that October. November saw the dismissal of 3 biblical studies instructors and 1 English professor,
with effect from the conclusion of the autumn semester. Do you recall the criticisms leveled against the Swaggarts and #039 financial practices?
His detractors persisted in casting doubt on his ministry and #039's openness and management of the large gifts it had received. His reputation was ruined by a mix of allegations of financial mismanagement and inappropriate behavior, which caused a precipitous drop in both donations and viewers.
The effect on Swaggart and #039's relatives was severe.
He was supported by his wife Frances Swaggart during the confession, but it was clear that their relationship was straining. As a public figure attempting to keep his own ministry afloat, their son Donnie was also caught in the crossfire. After leaving the family worship center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Swaggart became a Pentecostal preacher and an independent, non-denominational leader. He also founded Jimmy Swaggart Ministries and the Sun Life Broadcasting Network, SBN.
What did Swaggart take away from this? Did he make any effort to recover his losses? Not long after his initial encounter, on October 11, 1991, he found himself in a similarly precarious position with a prostitute once again.
His already ruined reputation took a major hit, and public outcry was renewed as a result. In Indio, a police officer stopped him. In California, for being a left-hand driver. A lady called Rosemary Garcia was in the vehicle with him. According to what Garcia told reporters afterwards, Swaggart had pulled over to ask her out on a sexual encounter.
He stopped me because of that. That is my profession. I work as a prostitute.
Donnie Swaggart, speaking in his father and #039's stead, took the podium after this story broke.
While his father was out at a family worship session, Donnie took it upon himself to offer the following remarks.
Holy Spirit informed me it and #039's flat, so it and #039's not up to you.
Was Donnie a good boss under pressure?
His reputation took a major hit, and the televangelism community as a whole felt the effects of the controversy in the form of greater suspicion and investigation of other religious figures. Following this, Swaggart and #039's son Donnie made the announcement that their father would be temporarily resigning from his position at Jimmy Swaggart Ministries in order to receive therapy and recover.
Did Jimmy finish?
He kept on ministering despite the setbacks, gradually restoring his reputation and keeping his faithful followers. He was able to reacquaint himself with his audience and continue his ministry in the years that followed because to his innovative media use, especially through the Sun Life Broadcasting Network. His son Donnie looked up to him during this troubled time and followed in his footsteps as a priest, just like his dad. Because of his father and #039's huge stature, Donnie spent his childhood in the background,
taking in the spirit of service that characterized the ministry. Donnie felt compelled to carry on his family business from an early age.
People in the audience and others who watched him preach were immediately drawn to his energetic and forceful delivery.
After assuming the role of ministry executive vice president,
Donnie decided to step up and play a pivotal role, making sure the group and its outreach activities ran smoothly. Collaborating alongside his father as co-pastors at the Family Worship Center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Donnie brings a blend of traditional and modern perspectives to address current challenges. His lectures, which reach millions of people, address modern issues while remaining faithful to Christianity and #039's foundational beliefs. However, Donnie and #039's ministry has grown beyond just television and radio, and his impact goes well beyond the pulpit as well. Through his travels, he becomes immersed in the world of evangelical missions, sharing a message of faith and hope with people all across the world. His marriage story is riveting and full of surprises, even though his ministry has been less eventful. In 1972, Donnie and Debbie Swaggart were married for the first time. A tough point in their partnership in 2003 ultimately led to a divorce, leaving many to wonder what would happen to them next. Donnie wed Judy in 2004 in an effort to start again, but their marriage didn't and #039 last long, divorcing in 2006. A surprising turn happened in the middle of the chaos.
After getting separated, Donnie and Debbie eventually reunited.
They vowed to each other that they would overcome their problems and become even more committed when they remarried.
Donnie and Debbie have been faithful companions in ministry and life since then. After raising Gabriel, Matthew, and Jennifer, they are now relishing in grandparenthood with 8 grandkids.
Not only do Jimmy and Donnie carry on the Swaggart name, but so does the following generation. Gabriel and Matthew Swaggart are the sons of Donnie Swaggart, and they are both very committed to their duties in the church.
The Jimmy Swaggart Ministry and the Crossfire Youth Ministry are linked.
Gabriel serves as the church and #039's assistant pastor on a full-time basis. While Matthew had a lifelong passion for photography, he turned it into a career as a TV graphic artist. Similar to his famous father, Donnie has also been embroiled in a number of high-profile scandals that have garnered widespread discussion and coverage. In 2014, when appearing on Francis and Friends, his mother Frances Swaggart and #039's show, he had one of his most heated moments. During a contentious conversation, Donnie drew a startling analogy, comparing LGBTQ activists to ISIS, meaning that they would be willing to behead Christians if given the opportunity. The statement was quite controversial and caused a lot of people to feel angry and critical, including LGBTQ rights groups.
The reaction was rapid and harsh because many people thought he was encouraging bigotry and hate speech.
For the Swaggarts, this was an #039 an isolated incident involving their stances on LGBTQ matters. Donnie Swaggart and #039's dad, Jimmy Swaggart, said he would murder a gay guy if he caught a love glance from him during a similarly contentious lecture that he delivered on television. A formal complaint was filed with a Canadian broadcasting body in response to the comment, which sparked considerable censure. The harm was done, even though Jimmy eventually apologized.
Jimmy has made an incredible effect via his lifelong dedication to sharing the gospel.
His television shows have transcended cultural boundaries, reaching over 300 million viewers in 104 countries. However, Jimmy and #039's influence extends far beyond the realms of film and theater. From disaster relief to food and medical treatment, his humanitarian activity has helped those in need.
So, how would you characterize Jimmy? His controversial actions or the good he did?